So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this one is going to be on the Mountain Pass. I actually was going to do a battle which was part of an RP series on, I believe, the DF Clan's Discord, but unfortunately I do need the map file before I'm able to do that because I got sent the replay without the scenario file, which is, obviously it means I can't do it until I know which one it is because there are so many maps that people make that it can be very hard to tell them apart. So we will be on the Mountain Pass today, and this is a map which has been here ever since vanilla, and obviously, as I've said before, I do rather like it because it can work out in different ways each time. There's a lot of places which, there's a lot of different pathways, different areas that you can go into based on where you start, based on which army you are, and obviously this is going to be a 4v4. I did actually have another Mountain Pass battle as well, which was a 2v2v2, so there would be 3 teams on that one, so that would obviously work out very differently with the deployment zones, whereas this one, obviously, the map is split right down the middle. You obviously have very different terrain features depending on what part of the map you start on, and obviously depending on what team you are. You can see back there that the Umbar army has had to deploy very far back in the corner because their deployment zone essentially cuts them off from their ally with this mountain range here. So we'll go through the armies and then we'll see if this one works out any differently to the ones previously. And we'll start off with, I guess, the red team, seeing as we're on their side of the battlefield. Starting off with this army over here in the east, Bloodbath McGrath, who is going to be playing as Lothlorien. Lothlorien are probably the most tricky of the Elven factions to play at the moment. Mirkwood might have something to say about that, but Mirkwood at the very least do have a very defined identity in their skirmishers and their hidden units, whereas Lothlorien can't fall back on that so much. Lothlorien also don't have mounted units which have bonuses to cavalry in melee combat like Mirkwood do. But Lothlorien do still have a lot of very strong units, you just have to be careful when you play as them. You have the Galathram Nobles, for example, which are an extremely powerful unit both in melee and at range, backed up by the Lothlorien Spears. Lothlorien are all about doing damage quite quickly, much more of a damage focus in melee in particular than a faction like Imladris, for example, who have a lot more defensive values. Lothlorien Archers, of course, heavy Elven Archers, which can double as very, very capable swordsmen in melee, as well as some more Lothlorien Spears, so a very clustered army here. The Lothlorien Blades, which obviously will not be a part of Lothlorien in the next patch, 0.97, because essentially Lothlorien will be receiving a similar unit to the other Elven factions have, which is a sort of more basic level swordsman, something like the Eldar Makar, for example, or the Megil Erin, because it's something that Lothlorien do lack at the moment, and they do have 2 sort of higher end line infantry units which basically fulfill the same role, only one is a little bit more defensive, one a little bit more offensive, and the axes will be staying because it fits with Lothlorien's damage dealing theme a little bit more. There's obviously sword masters in here as well, which are very powerful units indeed, sword masters. The Lothlorien warriors as well, which obviously are 2-handed axe unit, which is actually something that the other elven factions do tend to lack a little bit. Mirkwood do have them, but it is hybridized with an archer unit, whereas Lothlorien have got a dedicated unit for that purpose. A very elite army here mostly, though. A lot of the heavier elven units backed up by some Metha Ilaz Gelen, which obviously can double as spears as well as javelins. So all in all, a very elite army. We'll see if that pays off for Bloodbath. He does need to come to the aid of his ally fairly quickly, though. He can't afford to camp on the hill, because down here we can see that another elven faction, Eothard, is going to be here, and it's going to be Imladris. Imladris, of course, are very capable at holding their own, but they could end up being overwhelmed here with their smaller numbers if they do not receive support, at least from a ranged sense from Lothlorien. Norreturno warriors, and the main draw of the Norreturno warriors is the fact they are actually fairly decent in melee for what they cost. Other than that, though, they are relatively similar to what they offer you from the Eldar Makar. Over here we have the Gwathi Arthand, which will be called the Keepers of Aeglos in the upcoming patch. Very, very durable. They don't do their damage particularly quickly, even though they are elves, they do still suffer from that spear malice a little bit, but they are extremely durable. It takes an awful lot to kill them off. Back there we have the Eldarenwe Harry Hatal as well, which, similar story, only there are slightly more of them, but they also don't have the benefit of multiple HP. Imladris Guardians, which have the armor upgrade, obviously a very, very strong line infantry unit. They might be the strongest line infantry unit overall when you upgrade their armor. That's a debatable fact. I mean, you can only have 2 for a start, so it's not that you can blanket your line with them, but even so, very, very strong. We also have the Eldarenwe Harry Makil, which, again, outside of the multiple HP units, they are probably the most deadly damage dealers in terms of an infantry unit in the game. The Imladris Sentries, which of course fantastic pike unit, very similar in terms of their effectiveness to something like the Narun Aru Sentinels or the 1st Legion Pikes. They're on that tier just below the very powerful Karos Galadhon's Guardians that Lothlorien can bring. And then the Gwaith Ymir Dane, which obviously the Smiths of Eregion, They will be changed to being pure shock infantry in the next match with a two-handed warhammer instead of the hammer and shield that they have now, which I think is a little bit better. Giving them a little bit more damage will make them a little bit stronger all around. I think a little bit better at their job. At the moment they're good, but they're not they don't set the world on fire, which I feel as though a unit like that really should. Oh, just before we move on, however, did also miss more Eldraenway Harry McKeel up on the side here, more Imladris Sentries, more Guardians, lots of Guardians actually, then Haru Quinga and Norituna Warriors. So I guess there's a fair amount of funds to play with here, but this is still a very, very expensive Imladris army. Up here on the hill, we have Gondor, played by Deus Imperator Rex. He has got some Gondor infantry with the armour upgrades, which as far as a line infantry unit goes, obviously this is where Gondor shine a little bit more so, perhaps, than the other human kingdoms. Their infantry is obviously a lot more durable, a lot more solid, especially when you upgrade that armour. They're not exactly the best in terms of dealing damage, and there are stronger line infantry units, stuff like the Castamir's Legion, of course, but those are units which are significantly more expensive than the Gondor infantry. Also a Trebuchet, which we've seen on this map before, be exceedingly effective. We also have the Veterans of Osgiliath, which as far as a shielded archer unit goes, one of the strongest, can also double as good line infantry. Gondor archers with the first level of armour upgrade. We also have some Kaer-Andros Swordmasters here as well, which the human Swordmaster units are kind of risky to bring, I've noticed, because they are fairly expensive, and if you don't use them correctly they can fall apart very quickly. But in this sort of situation, where they have a clearly defined choke point to try and hold, they should do okay. Wardens of the White Tower, of course, currently one of the strongest sword and board units in the game, alongside the likes of the Witch Realm Blackguard. I think Numenor's unit will ultimately supplant them in that regard, though, in the upcoming 0.97. But even so, Wardens of the White Tower, very, very strong. Guards of Osgiliath, obviously Pikes, Fountain Guard. You don't see a Gondor army without Fountain Guard for a very, very good reason. And then the Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard. Cavalry can be useful on this map, despite it being a lot more windy and choke pointy. It just depends on how you use it. And then finally the other army, way back here in the backfield, in this case deploying all the way over here, which could actually lead to the blue team ganging up on his allies if he's not careful. So he's obviously hoping that the enemy will charge through that very narrow choke point to come and get him, but they are under no obligation to do so. So we'll see if this tactic pays off for Captain Gervais. Obviously we've seen him play very well quite recently, so we'll see. He's playing as Isengard. Uruk-hai infantry are a very solid line infantry indeed, and they're going to be backed up by a lot of damage dealers, Half-Orc Baneguard, and then back there some Uruk-hai Berserkers, so a lot of AP shock infantry combined with the very solid central Isengard force, which Isengard do have a more solid core than most of the other Orc factions. Angmar have got a lot of good stuff, but generally speaking they are more rush orientated anyway. Isengard are a little bit more balanced in this regard. Stuff like these Pikes, for example, Uruk-hai Pikemen are a very central pillar to the Isengard army, and they can make your job of holding yourself together a little bit easier if things get into a grind, whereas a lot of the Orcs can find themselves slowly starting to bleed their manpower if they get into a fight like that. Not so for Isengard though. Nazkai up here on the hill, as well as the Uruk-hai crossbows. Nazkai obviously extremely powerful. Uruk-hai crossbows, more Reaver, so a lot of armor-piercing damage at range and in melee here. The Isengard Ballista is also a very strong piece of siege equipment. I think it's the strongest in the game at the moment, because of its very wide area of effect. The fact that it is essentially a catapult in terms of its damage-dealing potential, but also, you know, the accuracy of a ballista, the best of both worlds. Trolls of the White Hand, very derpy, but that will change in the upcoming patch. And then obviously the Champions of the White Hand, probably the strongest in terms of dealing damage on horseback to other cavalry in the game. Melkor's Chosen are up there as well, but Champions of the White Hand are really very, very powerful. So now we shall move on to Team Blue, starting off with the force that was initially going to go after Isengard, but they may actually sort of readjust and start heading to aid their allies in the centre if Isengard are that far away. We have Erebor, played by Aeglar Galdulithon. He has got some Ironfoot crossbows here on the front, so obviously a crossbow duel could erupt between Erebor and Isengard, and obviously the dwarves have got fantastic crossbows. Erebor, very, very good at that. Ironfoot Pikes combined with Ironfoot Warriors, a solid phalanx list. The dwarven units have pretty decent mass anyway, and obviously their heavy infantry is one of their primary focuses. We've also got some Ironfoot Spears here on the flank, as well as some Ironfoot Axe Throwers. Obviously Axe Throwers in the upcoming 0.97 patch will lose their AP, but gain base damage, so this will essentially make them very, very strong against lightly armoured targets, but heavy armour is going to be a way to sort of deal with that, and that's a way to sort of differentiate Axe Throwers from Javelins, because at the moment they're basically the same. Over here, more Ironfoot Crossbowmen, the Blacklock Engineers, which one of the scariest singular units in the game because of the devastation it can wreak. I mean, I would argue that this is, In terms of the amount of kills it can get, it is potentially one of the strongest. I mean, Rangers I think have got more ammunition, which is probably why Rangers, you see them get more kills on average. But in a short amount of time, the Blacklocks can just lay waste to an army. They are very, very potent. And then we've got some iron for axe throwers backing them up as well. A Dwarven Catapult, so 2 of the unique artillery pieces here, although the Isengard Ballista can snipe out the Dwarven Catapult, which obviously it will struggle to do. We've also got some Axe Guard of Erebor over here, very, very strong axemen, as you would expect from the dwarves. And then up here on the hill we've got the 2 very elite infantry units which Erebor have decided to bring. The general is going to be in the Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin, and also the Obsidian Guard, which, you know, they can sit in melee for a long, long time very, very happily. So, moving on then to the player who sent me the replay, actually, we have Herald of Light in the Dark, who's going to be playing as Khazad-dûm. He's got some Merc Cavalry, which could be used to go to the aid of Erebor, although I would recommend against funneling into Isengard over there. We'll see how the Merc Cavalry gets used, and looks like Khazad-dûm is going to be charging directly into Gondor, not waiting for them to get settled, which is, I think, a good idea. Khazad-dûm obviously at 0.96, exceedingly strong. And I feel as though they have all the right tools to deal with Gondor. Gondor are focused around their infantry, but Khazad-dûm just have better infantry. The Orc Hunters are here, obviously good archers. And then back here the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, but now we get into the real meat and bones of a Khazad-dûm army, their Central Infantry Corps. Miners for the chaff. 3rd Legion are obviously a terrific line infantry unit. The Shield Guard, the 4th Legion, to my mind one of the main reasons why Khazad-dûm are so strong, because they're a spear unit without the spear malice, which essentially means they're line infantry but with the mass and anti-cavalry capabilities of spears, so you really can't go wrong from picking them, to be honest. All kinds of Khazad-dûm are over here. 2nd Legion Axe Guard, which essentially offer you the same functionality as the Axe Guard of Erebor. They don't have the armour upgrades in this case though. Some Sons of the Fallen, very, very potent spears. Guards of Khazad-dûm, I think the only sword and board unit in the game which is 3 HP, which, you know, probably puts them ahead of the Witchbound Blackguard and the Wardens of the White Tower, but they're not AP like the Mithril Guard. There's also 1st Legion Pikes, the Mithril Guard are over there as well. Sentries of Khazad-dûm too, so very much a very infantry focused Khazad-dûm army as you would expect, so we'll see how Gondor reacts to that, because it is going to be largely a 1v1 initially over here, depending on how this goes. Then we have Dale, played by the Pinky, so there's a fair few names I haven't actually seen before in this fight, so that's good, mixed in with a few that I certainly have. Dalian Marksmen, obviously, they're going to be having to skirmish with the High Elves and potentially Lothlorien as well. This is a very unenviable task to advance into this valley with the Elves right there. They might elect not to, actually, might just stay here and wait for Khazad-dûm to start wearing Gondor down. We'll see. Lake Town Infantry obviously are going to have no chance at all against the High Elven Infantry, but numbers may be key as this fight goes along. We also have the Barding Herd here on the front line. They are a very solid halberdier indeed, very heavily armoured. Decent, well, they've got a small shield value as well, but obviously the main, just having that very solid halberdier in the centre of your line is important for Dale. It gives them that anchor that they need. We've also got some Dalian Royal Guard over here, which is where King Brand is going to be hanging out. Not the AP arrows that the Blackshot Dragon Slayers have, but slightly less expensive. We also have the Elves of Esgaroth and the Swordmasters of Karnan. Swordmasters of Karnan might not do too badly against the Elves, but ultimately they will find themselves outmatched by the better Elven units. And then we have some Morroquendi Pikes as well, which are obviously Elves themselves will be facing off against their brethren from the west. Then we've got some Dalian Cavalry and some Earls of Dale, so some Swift Lancers and some more tanky melee cav. Not sure how useful that's going to be. They could cause some disruption to Imladris, because Imladris obviously can't cover the field quite so well as a few other factions you could speak of. And then we have, honestly, one of my favourite looking units, to be honest, the Bardian Marksmen with the armour upgrade, the Lamellar armour, the helms. I do like them, and they're obviously terrific in a skirmish fight. They're one of the units which can certainly go toe-to-toe with the Elves in a skirmish fight. Now, the final army, of course, we have Umbar, Eclipse 2500 of the Dark Cloud, a name that I've seen a few times before at this point. Of course, they're savages. They will do horrendously against the Elves because of their complete lack of armour and very low skill. The AP isn't completely useless against Imladris, but they would be much better served sort of staying in reserve or just being used as chaff. Belagaia Halberds, which obviously the Phalanx could be very useful, but you know, they do obviously open themselves up to range fire by not carrying a shield into battle. Back here we have the Nadu Tariq, which again, Mace Med without the armour upgrade. A good unit, I would say, but you can expect them to work miracles. They are upper mid-tier, very low high tier perhaps. It is, the Abrazanim are an interesting one. I mean, they are certainly better than standard units, but they aren't quite the sort of the amazing units that you might expect them to be. But still, the AP will come in very handy against the right targets. The Narduzagar, Human Swordmasters once again. They'll be very similar to other human swordmasters, like the swordmasters of Karnan or Kaer-Andros swordmasters. Differences in terms of melee defense and armor are obviously what separates them. But yeah, again, like human swordmasters, they can do very well, but they are also very easy to sort of misuse, I've noticed. You can't really just throw them in like cheap axemen and know that their AP damage will recoup their value, because they are slightly more expensive. Castamir's Legion, obviously a unit which I can't sing the praises of enough. Very, very solid line infantry. And finally at the back we have Castamir himself is going to be with the Naru Sentinel, so he's with the pikes. They're not multiple HP, but they are obviously very, very solid, and they are right at the back over here. So, without further ado, let's begin. I'd be interested to see how this works. Now I would certainly, yeah, Khazad-dûm immediately rushing forth, and they should feel confident here, because they need to get in quickly so that Gondor can't get their trebuchet into a good position, because the trebuchet is one area in which Gondor can make Khazad-dûm pay quite dearly here. But if it comes down to just a pure melee fight, even with the armor upgrades, I mean, the Gondor infantry is very sturdy when you upgrade the armor, but against a faction with a lot of damage dealing potential in melee like Khazad-dûm have, it's not going to help them enough to tilt the fight in their favour. Not saying that Gondor don't have options here, but I would have expected to see more Fountain Guard, maybe the Nimlothian Honour Guard, stuff like that, if they were really serious about taking on the dwarves. Pelagia Marines as well probably would have been a must-bring, and you can always tell who you're going to be fighting in a match like this because of how the lobby system works, so you can sort of prepare in that regard, and I'm surprised that Gondor didn't bring any javelins. You can see that the Wardens of Minas Ithil have revealed themselves, so those are rangers, which will do some damage. Again, I didn't see the Athelian rangers either. Ooh, and here comes the trebuchet, which is actually getting into a decent enough position, so the dwarves do need to be somewhat careful as this battle progresses. Let's actually turn this down a little bit so we can zoom right into the guts of this fight. The 4th Legion Shield Guard charging right into the front line, the Gondor infantry trying to hold. There are the guards of Osgiliath in here as well. Now, while I would certainly give the edge to Khazad-dûm in melee over Gondor, Gondor at the very least won't fold like a lot of other factions will. If this was, for example, Cardolan or Arthedain even, their infantry is lacking in a few areas that Gondor's isn't. Gondor have got a little bit more of a focus around here, so we'll see. I mean, as this fight goes along, I would certainly expect this quality of the dwarves to start shining through, but that trebuchet could be a very key factor here. The trebuchet in general obviously has got a large amount of splash damage, but you can also see that it's immediately being focused by the dwarven arrows, and that was a lot of damage that they just did. You can tell how much damage it was because that was frames. Also, I think the frames are probably suffering because the Wardens of Minas Ithil are firing, and body piercing always does wonders for the health of my frame rate. Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, obviously this is a very aggressive stance from the dwarves, and obviously Gondor are having to meet this in kind by committing forward a lot of their own infantry as well. So this is going to take a toll. Whoever wins here is not going to be in as good a condition as perhaps they would like for later on in the fight. This would also sort of... It feels as though this central portion of the battlefield is going to be relatively key as well, because it will offer you the high ground. And this is where the fight is going to be centred around, because there are going to be 2 fights happening either side as well. Meanwhile, Erebor are moving forward, so this is good news for Isengard behind that hill over there, because it means that Godulithon is going to be moving in, and yeah, interesting. So I would have suggested Erebor probably would have been better off going to the aid of Khazad-dûm, if anything. Meanwhile, Dale are not moving forward, which is probably wise. They're trying to bait Imladris and Lothlorien into coming forward up against Dale and Umbar. We'll see. I feel as though this is going to be a bit of a staring contest, and I do feel as though actually this middle engagement over here is probably going to be what decides the fight. As soon as it's clear that one side is starting to gain the upper hand over here, it's going to force the team of the side who's losing to do something. And you can see the balance of forces is evenly matched as more and more dwarves start piling in particular units like the 2nd Legion over here. And now that the Dwarven Pikes are also getting onto the front line, meaning that the Guards of Osgiliath don't have the phalanx advantage to themselves, I would imagine that the Dwarves, you can see that the Dwarves are starting to force Gondor back onto the defensive. And trying to engage Khazad-dûm in a sort of just a straight up scrap like this is always really, really tricky. Like I would have expected, yeah, like more Fountain Guard, Javelins. You need to blitz the Dwarves down quickly, and that's not easy with their high defensive values and their high armour. Gondor do have the ability to, but again, there's a lot of archers back there, which archers in general, I can see why you'd bring them against Khazad-dûm, but this is too many archers, I think. Khazad-dûm are able to just absorb that pressure too easily. And you can see now that the vast majority of the Dwarven infantry is now in close quarters anyway, so the arrows are not really going to be able to get in there. You can see also that the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers are I think they're giving the trebuchet crew the business, actually, because I think Khazad-dûm realise that if they can kill the trebuchet crew off, they're pretty much golden. The Wardens of Minas Ithil need to start shooting along the lines here. I can tell from the sort of the angle that they're holding their bows at that they're trying to go over the hill and probably start hitting the Khazad-dûm reclaimers, which is the wrong target. They need to focus on the infantry fight here. They need to start shooting right along this line, because that's one of the only ways, again, that you can deal damage to the dwarves in this situation. Enough damage, anyway, to do this fight justice. The Citadel Guard, though, with their AP here in the middle, doing very well for themselves. Obviously, the Citadel Guard's AP is one of the main reasons why you want to bring them. But Gondor's infantry line is holding, which is a testament to their quality. I mean, everyone knows, it's generally agreed upon in 0.96 that Khazad-dûm are the strongest faction in the game, and this is why, because their infantry is so strong. But Gondor holding them, and also you can see down there, Gwathi Myrdain. So Imladris seeing the danger. This is good. I like this. This is good team play. Here comes the trebuchet as well. So routing off those dwarven miners, this could be the break that Gondor needs. The aid from some of those Imladris units over there, very, very key as this fight goes on, I think. Because stuff like the Gwathi Myrdain is the sort of unit which can certainly go toe-to-toe with the dwarves. More of the Imladris units like the Heru Makil also would be very, very handy. The elves can certainly outplay the dwarves in terms of melee skill. But they need to get in here quickly. These Fountain Guard are on their last legs. They're having to go up against 1st Legion, 2nd Legion, and now Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, who I think are just going to force their way through and go after the trebuchet crew directly. Well, what's going on here? Yeah, it's a bit of a skirmish fight. You can see now that the decision has been made. Umbar and Dale are going to go down this valley here. I would imagine that they're going to have to leave a force behind in this valley to sort of guard their rear from the assault from Lothlorien and Imladris that comes forward. Although this is again a little bit more of a quiet front, just being strafed by the elves as they move along, and obviously a lot of kills here. Going after stuff like the Barding Herd is a good idea because they are a strong unit indeed. Meanwhile, you also see the champions of the White Hand coming forward here. This is obviously going to be a very slow engagement because whoever decides to take the initiative and go through this choke point here is going to have a pretty bad time of it. The Isengard Ballista and the Dwarven Catapult are very, very capable units at dishing out damage. Meanwhile, these champions of the White Hand able to get a very nice charge here into the Ironfoot Warriors, which is going to do a huge amount of damage to them. They were braced, but they aren't spears, so their ability to deal a lot of damage to this unit is going to be relatively limited, and also the fact that the champions of the White Hand are so strong. But champions of the White Hand paying for that quite dearly. See there the bolts starting to fly in, also the pikes in close proximity, so that may not have been worth it overall. Champions of the White Hand are a very, very important unit to preserve the lives of. Meanwhile, this fight continues to go on. The Sindar Blade Masters from Lothlorien are now over here, trying to help shore up, and Khazad-dûm were just about to break Gondor, I think. Now the reinforcements from Lothlorien and Imladris are over here. Mainly Lothlorien, it must be said. Sylvan Staff Masters also over here. They have very low damage values overall, but it is AP damage that they deal. Gondor are just about still in fighting shape. The veterans of Osgiliath pulling out their swords and shields and getting into melee. At this point now, it's Khazad-dûm are the ones that are going to need some support, because with this Elven reinforcement line coming in, you know, they are very strong, but this is a fight which they're going to start falling behind in quite quickly. Now, fortunately for them, it does look as though the large amount of reinforcements from Dale and Umbar will arrive, and that will be enough, you would imagine, to give the blue team the high ground here. Gwathi Myrdain on the front line. That AP damage going to be invaluable against the dwarves, receiving some support from the veterans of Osgiliath, who are no pushovers in melee either, particularly with those armour upgrades. Now we can see that the Mithril Guard and the Guards of Khazad-dûm both going into pretty much the same section of line, so this is where the dwarves are at their strongest now. It's going to take an awful lot to stop them. They're going to need, I think, even more infantry than they have in the middle here now at this point. The Red Alliance. Gondor Archers, which are now out of ammunition, and I can't imagine the Gondor Archers, any of the Gondorian skirmish line, except for maybe the Wardens of Minas Ithil, did a particularly good job at dealing with Khazad-dûm. So now we'll see if their melee prowess is going to be enough to sort of justify their inclusion. Very skirmish-heavy Gondor army, which of course Gondor, very good archer line, but just because they have a very good archer line doesn't mean you need to overcommit to them, particularly against a faction like Khazad-dûm, who are just very, very good at dealing with that sort of thing, really. First Legion fights. Khazad-dûm are starting to run out of steam a little bit here, but you can see that very quickly Umbar are marching. Corsair Savages are going to be getting onto the front line. They're tired. Corsair Blackguards as well. This is a This is something which I would consider to be an overwhelming force on the way up here now, though. Even with the Lothlorien reinforcements, with the arrival of Umbar and Dale, this is going to go poorly for the red team. So, I do like that this is what they are doing. They need to be quick, however. Eothad and Bloodbath McGrath with the units that they have over here. Looks like mainly Eothad. But he needs to start attacking them from the rear. Now, this is obviously going to be the rear guard action that they've set up, and this is a large amount of units in loose formation. Obviously, the Dalian skirmishers in particular are going to very much enjoy this fight. But they need to get down here, because if they leave this too long, you can just see the stream of units, the columns of infantry which are just moving forwards. This is going to go badly if they allow this to happen. I mean, Lothlorien's reinforcements are very much appreciated, I'm sure. The Sylvan Rangers could do a real number on these units as well. Shooting in there to the Abrazani Nadi Tariq, you can see them melt before that volley from the Sylvan Rangers. The Corsair Savages are on the front line. They're already tired though. But Khazad-dûm, who have managed to do some damage here, are now going to get reinforced, and Dale and Umbar both have got some very tasty infantry units themselves. You can see there that Abrazani Nadi Tariq are here. The AP will be useful against Gondor, less so against the Lothlorien units, but here you can see now that Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard on the way up, Imladris Guardians, Eldarenway Harry McKeel, they need to be swift, because this part of the line is looking like it's going to break. Corsair Savages and Blackguards pushing with the Dwarves against the very lightfoot Sindar Blade Masters. Obviously the Sindar Blade Masters are a very competent unit, but they aren't exactly the highest in terms of mass. A relatively small unit, relatively lightly armoured. Harry McKeel are now coming forward. The Sylvan Rangers have been butchered by something which I can only imagine to be... Gondor Archers are back here, but I can only imagine that was Corsair Blackguards. Yeah, you can see the Blackguards are just shifting across to the other section of line now. Corsair Blackguards can deal a lot of damage very, very quickly, but things at this point going very much in favour of the blue team here in the middle, I would say. Khazad-dûm's army is honestly very depleted at this point, but the overwhelming force that Umbar in particular seems to have arrived with was enough to break Gondor, and the Lothlorien reinforcements were not enough to keep them together in this situation. The Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard are walking, which is not where they need to be. The Harry McKeel, it says defeat seems certain. That is not going to be the case in sustained melee. The Corsair Blackguards will get dumpstered by Harry McKeel. What have we here? Isengard. And actually you can see over here as well. Obsidian Guard moving over. I like this actually. Erebor's starting to filter more and more of his troops over here, because the central engagement is going very well for blue. And if Captain Gervais just sits here in the top corner, his team are going to fall away. His team are going to lose. This is interesting. Excuse me, I think I'm losing my voice again. That's strange. I'm not sure whether they've actually lost that piece of artillery because it's gone out of the bounds and these artillery crewmen now can't mount it. That would be very unfortunate, but again, it's artillery in Medieval 2 and it's pathfinding. You run the risks of weirdness like this happening, so if you deploy that close to a cliff edge or the edge of the map, it's always something that can happen. This is a bit too slow here from Eothad. I know that this is a very intimidating site to go into, but if you don't charge, if you don't make something happen, if you don't try and engage all of these lesser units in melee, then your fellows in the middle are going to be destroyed, because now with Umbar and the Dwarves, that is an infantry wrecking ball which is coming forward, and unfortunately they were a little bit more unified. Obviously Imladris, Gondor and Lothlorien more than capable of mixing it in melee with those factions as when they're unified, but as it is, they didn't have the unification which the blue team has. And obviously with Erebor units now potentially trickling in as well, things could stand to get a lot more ugly for Team Red. And you can see here the Corsair Blackguards doing a nice amount of damage to the Lothlorien Spears. The Blackguards so far proving to be a very sound investment from Eclipse 2500. Lothlorien have come forward with a lot more reinforcements though, which, at this point Umbar is in danger of losing steam a little bit. They do need to send, I think, more reinforcements up here, but fortunately they do have that in the form of Dale's units, Earls of Esgaroth, Morrick-Wendy Pikes, all the right units coming forward. The Corsair Blackguards are also going to be able to do a lot of damage, as are the Maetha Ilazgelen though. Again, the thing with the sort of consistent, very aggressive push like this is you do need to keep it going. More reinforcements needed, but Castamir's Legion, Sons of the Fallen, they should be fine here. Like, I can't really imagine this attack is going to run out of steam anytime in the immediate future. Meteor Guard and Guards of Khazad-dûm still going strong. Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard managing to push their way through there, but they were shaken for a little while there, which is not the easiest task. There are also these Castamir's Rangers, which are getting ready to get in position, obviously body piercing. There is the Gondorian General. Unsurprising, the Gondorian army at this point I think is pretty much gone. Charge into the Castamir's Rangers, but unfortunately this is where the Gandalf's Retinue Bodyguard I think is going to meet their doom. Because there are so many halberds, spears and pikes around here, they're going to get caught on one of them eventually. And that will be the end of Deus Imperator Rex's army. Much to his dismay, I'm sure. Well, what's going on down here? Ooh, you can see here the Noritano warriors have had a very poor time of it at range, and trying to sort of whittle them down at range is the wrong thing to do here, because Dale have got so many archer units. You need to charge. You need to get in there, try and take away their ranged advantage as much as you can, and use Imladris's much superior skills in melee. I mean, the only infantry units that Dale really have down here are the Lake Town infantry, dedicated infantry anyway, and they are going to be absolutely no match for an Imladris advance. You will take losses on the advance, but this is not worth it, because you're bleeding your own skirmishers, which could be useful later on in the fight, and you're sort of, you know, giving the blue team the time they need to slowly but surely grind your allies to death in the middle here. Bloodbath McGrath's reinforcements obviously came over here, as well as a few units from Imladris themselves, but I don't think it's going to be enough here.
The enemy army flees the field. After them, cut the cowards down.
Well, that will be the distinct end of Gondor. You can see now that Sons of the Fallen have managed to get in and around as well. There's a gap here, which the dwarves have taken advantage of, so good work there from Herald of Light in the Dark. Khazad-dûm still, obviously, much fewer units than they had at the start of the fight, but still very much a big part of this assault. And with the assistance of Umbar and Dale, Lothlorien just being forced back on the defensive here. Crossbow Corsairs also getting into position. Cavalry just as an insurance policy. What is going on here? Routing Lothlorien spears. Crossbows may be having to arc their shots a little bit, but they are causing those staff masses to become shaken. Meanwhile, what have we
The
here?
enemy are badly blooded. They have lost half their men.
Ironfoot warriors moving in. Now I'm a little bit surprised actually that the champions of the White Hand here are not just charging directly into the Ironfoot warriors and breaking them, because they would have absolutely no trouble doing so. But at this point I think that the engagements have gone sour enough that, you know, the time for Captain Gervais to be proactive has probably passed, and he should probably just stand here. Unfortunately, however, I feel as though this here has probably screwed him a little bit, because I feel as though that this artillery piece is stuck, and with the Isengard Ballista he could have made a bit more of a fight of it, but as it is, other than that, no. I don't know whether some sort of agreement has been reached here where the Dwarves Variable will just come in and kill the artillery crew off, and Gervais will let him do that, although I would imagine that after that these Ironfoot warriors will be charged into oblivion by the champions of the White Hand. Meanwhile, Godhelm Einau, again a very solid unit indeed, but again not the way I think it needed to be done. Again, this is a relatively small Imladris army, but it's elite. They needed to just charge in, be a little bit more proactive. As it is, though, Dale will be very pleased with how this engagement has gone, because he's got so many archers. The skirmish fight is exactly what he wanted, and the Lake Town infantry will get committed now that the Imladris infantry is finally starting to make contact. But the Lake Town infantry wasn't needed to be pressed into service earlier, which obviously would have been devastating for them in melee. Meanwhile, this still has been the epicenter of this battle here in the middle of the mountain range. The Lothlorien archers being committed to melee, but at this point it is very much a losing battle here. The blue team continuing to push back. Eldar and Haru McKeel on the front line, but just outnumbered here. You can still see that there's Khazad-dûm units, the Meteor Guard, still pretty healthy actually. I don't know where the Guards of Khazad-dûm have gone. There they are. Guards of Khazad-dûm also pretty healthy, but 3 HP will do that for you. Lothlorien units starting to rout. Yeah, mass rout here. Not great for them. And that means that all of these units now, which have taken the centre, are pretty much free to move elsewhere. Which of course means it's bad news bears for the red team on other parts of the battlefield. See much. All the units we can see here, yeah, pretty much in a full retreat. Sentries of Khazad-dûm. And the cheering of the dwarves, celebrating after a fairly long and arduous push through the red team's defences. They are victorious with the help of Dale and Umbar. Now though, we finally have engagements down here, and we will certainly see that the Eldarenwe Haru-Vital will make very, very quick work of the Lake Town infantry, as well as the other elven units here. The Barding Herd will put up a little bit more of a fight, but then still not the sort of thing, provided the engagements are not poorly thought out, it's not the sort of thing which I would imagine Imladris will struggle too much with, and the archers are now not in a position where they can fire too easily. Fortunately for them, however, they do have the ability to just fire into the Imladris archers, which will do them a world of good. This should have happened sooner though. Much, much sooner. And this would have put pressure then on the blue team, because they still would have won in the middle obviously, but they would have had to deal with this from behind, but now reinforcements are going to be on their way down. The Dalians, the Morroquendi pikes in particular, which went up there to assist in Umbar and Khazad-dûm's push, are going to be on their way back down to help hold back the tide. There's also a few Erebor units like the Obsidian Guard over here, which certainly not the sort of unit to be taken lightly. Sword Masters of Karnan, also not the worst thing that you can commit against the elves. So that was the understanding that they had reached, I guess. Ah, I see. Very interesting bit of diplomacy. So they killed off enough of the artillery crew that now the artillery crew that's remaining, only 2 of them can be pushed. Genius. Unfortunately now there's only 8 men in that artillery crew left alive, which does mean that basically a couple of volleys from arrows will kill them. But it is going to come down to Captain Gervais here in the end. His Isengard army is going to have to face the combined might of pretty much every one of his enemies, which I don't think the Isengard Ballista is strong, but it's not that strong. Sword Mass of Karnan coming into the front line. I do like the Dalian shields.
If we remain true and steadfast, victory will be ours.
Even as they get skewered by the Gwaith Yarthand over here. But yeah, slowly but surely. Dale have got enough reinforcements over here to be a real pain, but you can also see that still the skirmish firepower that Dale possess still being used relatively wisely. Some Erebor reinforcements are also over here, so Imladris are here, and their skill is paying dividends. Sword Mass of Karnan. What is this over here? Galathrim nobles. They're about to be charged. That's not great for them, but it is only Merc cavalry, so the charge is not going to be too devastating. In fact, if they turned around, the Galathrim nobles will probably make very quick work of the basic Merc cav. But there's nothing left up here. A real devastating fight. Gondor obviously trying to go toe-to-toe in terms of just pure strength with Khazad-dûm, and in 0.96 there's really no one that can do that other than Imladris, I guess. Galathrim nobles. The Merc cavalry has stopped, so the Galathrim nobles going to try and shoot them. Interesting. Meanwhile, Imladris could still make life a little bit easier for Captain Gervais by doing a lot of damage here. They could at least lay the Dalians low. See here the Sword Mass of Karnan. Exactly what the Doctor ordered on the front line. Definitely one of the units which are better suited to fighting the elves with their higher skill. Here come the Axe Guard of Erebor. Their AP will be useful. Obviously Dwarven Heavy Infantry in general can mix it with the best. Imladris sentries here on the front line. That pike formation very, very strong. Going toe-to-toe here with the Morroquendi pikes, which pike to pike I would give the advantage there to the Imladris sentries certainly, but the Morroquendi pikes are still very, very strong. Very expensive, but very strong. You can see here the Barding Herd of sort of... They're here in the back lines, but I think that's because their formation has been so hideously disruptive that they're sort of just marooned back here. Bardian marksman shooting right along the line. Dale's line is relatively well constructed here. It just remains to be seen whether or not he has the...
Only half the enemy force remains.
Whether he has the ability to actually hold Imladris. Now, fortunately for him, he does have some help. Well, I say help. The Umbar player, I think, is going to start filtering over towards Erebor. Whereas the few Erebor units here as reinforcements are going to come over. Khazad-dûm's remaining units will probably come to the aid against Imladris as well, because guards of Khazad-dûm and Meteor Guard will be very effective against Imladris' infantry. The Morroquendi pikes are not really in the right formation here. The Imladris sentry is getting the better of this fight. Morroquendi pikes are going to come in to try and shore this line up, however. What is going on over here? Ah yes, the Merc Cavalry getting dubstered in melee by the Galathrim Nobles. Unsurprisingly, only one kill they got there as well. So obviously, melee cav is pretty highly specialised. Charging it into infantry, especially strong infantry like that, it's not going to net you the same results as a lance unit, certainly not. And I feel as though the dynamic between melee, lance and spear cav is really well thought out, and I feel as though the developers have done a really good job with that. None of the categories are useless, which is always good. There's always some useless units in the in Total War games. I'm sure anyone who played Shogun 2 will remember the Hojo fire mortars and how utterly worthless they were. Such a cool sounding concept, but so terrible. Whereas there's really very little of that in Reforged, and there has been very little of that throughout development, which is always good. 4th Legion now coming in, so Khazad-dûm coming to reinforce this line, but you can see how well Imladris have done against the odds here. Which just goes to show that this should have happened sooner, because then they wouldn't have had to deal with all of these reinforcements cycling down, because they would have been engaged at the top there.
The enemy general lies dead. Let the crows have his miserable bows, and let our swords have his men.
They would have been at the top there, as I was saying. And no reinforcements means I think Imladris would have won this fight. But as it was, they waited too long. They tried to skirmish, which was a horrible idea against that Dalian setup. And as it is, Dale are going, with the reinforcements, Dale are going to be victorious down here. The Lake Town Infantry doing their job. I'm sure the Lake Town Infantry were quaking in their boots at the thought of trying to stop that Imladris infantry force, but now with the reinforcements, much less scary. The Galathrim Nobles are on their way down here, but by the time they get here, I can't help but feel as though there won't be much left of Imladris. The cavalry is starting to charge through, which they could try and charge down the Galathrim Nobles. Dalian cavalry pushing right through the middle of this line. Massive Cannon swinging their Zweihanders around. I would imagine that's what the Dalian cavalry is going to do. Most of Imladris' army is made up of spears and pikes after all at this point. Dangerous to try and charge into, although they could. I mean, a rear charge will work, even on pikes. It's riskier, but it will work. And the Imladris Guardians here, broken and fighting to the death after that charge from the Dalian cavalry. Good use of lancers there. The Earls of Dale also charging into the middle. They're a little bit tankier. And that is going to be the end of the Imladris army. Guardian marksman over here also. And so this is going to leave Captain Gervais, who has basically lost nothing other than a large portion of his artillery crew and a few champions of the White Hand. Will he be able to defeat
Our men are winning the battle. If we continue like this, we will smash the enemy.
As I was saying, will he be able to face what is basically a fully healthy Erebor army? Here come the Dalian Cav. A nice charge there, obviously Lancers. That's the difference between Lancers and Melee Cav. The Melee Cav only got one kill. The Lancers killed basically 2/3 of the unit. And the Galathrim Nobles, this is pretty much all that remains of the army of Lothlorien. Haldir is there, fearlessly charging forth into the cavalry lines. And I think the Earls are going to be sufficient to kill him off. Obviously the Earls of Dale pretty tanky. The Dwarves are also following them in. Should have sat down here sooner, I feel like, in Imladris. Trying to sort of focus on one front against Khazad-dûm of all factions is maybe not the wisest move, but you live and learn. Haldir is in there, going ham, surrounded by Dalian marksmen, Axguard of Erebor, Earls of Dale.
Look how our cowardly foe runs. It is time to press the attack.
Unsurprising that Dale would align themselves with the two Dwarven factions.
Dead. Let the crows have his miserable bows, and let our swords have his men.
And this tried and true alliance has worked out very well so far, I must say. Things have gone exactly to code for the blue team thus far, and they presumably have a very significant percentage advantage. Maybe not as much as you might think, actually. 12% is not, a massive advantage, and I feel as though that's because Khazad-dûm are pretty much on their knees at this point. And Dale and Umbar will have taken a fair few losses as well going through those Lothlorien defenders. Like, they wouldn't have gone through there for free. It was obviously a significant victory, but it wasn't utterly humiliating for the red team there in the middle. So, it all comes down to Isengard. And they've got it all to do. I mean, they do have some good tools. They have the crossbows. They have the, well, they obviously have the ballista, even if that is very, very depleted. He probably should start using the ammunition in it now, just so that before it gets skirmished down by the Dalian archers when they arrive. He has the ability to hold for some time. He has the pikes, he has the infantry, he has the AP, which will come in handy against all of the attacking factions. He doesn't have Lert's hunting pack, however, which obviously as a ranger unit that would have been something else which would have been very, very handy as we approach the final 10,000 frames in this fight. Uruk-hai crossbows sort of trying to shift their way into position in the firing line. They need to be careful they don't get friendly fire here. They're much more likely to hit their own men in the back. And if they lose the champion to the White Hand, that would be devastating. Nice charge there into the Ironfoot warriors. They need to cycle out quickly though before the Ironfoot pikes make their presence felt. They also need to get out of there before they take a ballista bolt in the face. There goes the Uruk-hai crossbow shooting right into the gut of this Erebor army. I say army, platoon more than anything else. A miss there. Ironfoot pikes, and I think he'd be better off. Yeah, I mean, he's getting kills, which is good enough, I suppose. Erebor are obviously going to be the first ones in because they're by far the most healthy of the blue team's army, but you can see there just the stream of reinforcements on the way over. Eclipse 2500 has already got some of his Umbar forces over here because they completely ignored the Imladris engagement to come over here and reinforce quickly, which was fine. Khazad-dûm went to the aid of Dale, so again, good teamwork, good synergy there. And at this point, teamwork is not going to be important for the red team because obviously it's just not Bloodbath and Wrath, it's just Captain Gervais over here. Just him, with Isengard and the Uruk-hai. Here come the Uruk-hai Reavers, and actually breaking the Ironfoot warriors, very, very depleted. The AP, obviously going to be useful against the dwarves. They're not the finest in terms of quality though, so when Dale, Umbar and Khazad-dûm come over here, again this is a rather puzzling decision from Erebor to send these two units on their own, because they're obviously just going to get destroyed, feeding kills into Isengard, but even so, even with sort of slight mistakes like that, you would imagine that it's not going to go too well. Some nice kills there from the Isengard Ballista, once again doing hefty damage to the Erebor forces. Once again we're going to be seeing the crossbows. I think ultimately though Isengard will run out of ammunition before they need to, even if they use all of their ammunition perfectly, which they're doing very well here. Obviously doing a lot of damage to the on-rushing Erebor forces. Again, just a lethal volley there from the Ballista, the crossbow bolts doing their own damage. But I feel as though they're not going to have enough ammunition left to deal with Erebor and Umbar, not Erebor and Umbar, Dale and Umbar in particular. Khazad-dûm obviously don't have much left. But still, it's not as lopsided as it may appear from the minimap and from the events that have happened thus far. It's not impossible that Isengard win this, but it is exceedingly unlikely, I feel. A point-blank volley there into the Ironfoot warriors as they come forward. Also got some Balagai halberds moving in. See there that the Dwarven Catapult is now the target of the Isengard Ballista. One of them crumbling. Another point-blank volley, but the crossbow is going to have to get out of there. Although the the Ironfoot warrior is being charged immediately by the champions to the White Hand, which this wave-based assault is not going to go well with the champions to the White Hand here, because they can pick and choose their targets to charge. Trolls of the White Hand moving in as well. And obviously that's going to break them almost immediately. Unsupported here. There goes the Dwarven Catapult. Will it get a good hit? I mean, it killed off a couple of Uruk-hai pikemen. The Dwarven Catapult can be quite inaccurate, but there's a lot of surface area for them to hit, so it's unlikely that they'll make a... Well, they'll fire a volley and that it'll hit nothing, but it's also unlikely that they'll get really telling hits. I say that as it cuts right through the middle of the champions of the White Hand. Again, that's not going to be enough to kill them off completely. But these Dwarven crossbows open to the charge. Oh no, disaster. Disaster. And this is the danger. You need to be real careful when you're using your artillery and your crossbows, otherwise you're going to get friendly fire like that. And again, Captain Gervais can't afford any sort of mistakes as these fights go on, and that's the sort of thing which is only going to sort of cement my my stipulation that the blue team are going to crush his forces. The Snaga not getting into position quickly enough, they're going to have to run. And they're going to take some losses on the retreat from these Ironfoot warriors. This isn't the best engagement from Erebor, to be honest, sort of filtering in one unit at a time. It's definitely playing into Isengard's hands, but ultimately he is still doing damage in places. Champions the White Hand moving forward. But they're being the target of the crossbows as well. Obviously Erebor with their catapult and their crossbows. Once again, we're going to see some friendly fire though. More damage to the Ironfoot warriors. Champions the White Hand starting to hemorrhage unit models as time goes on, as the bolts go whizzing past their heads. Ironfoot Uruk-hai crossbows still doing their best on the Snaga, getting back into position. Definitely a game of cat and mouse being played here between Erebor and Isengard. It's definitely one that I think Isengard have had by far the better of, but the issue for Isengard is they have 3 other armies queuing up to basically give them the business. The Snaga need to throw a volley at some point, surely, but they don't. Slow on the uptake there. Snaga obviously not the highest quality units. They are still in range though. Isengard's army, I think, is just waiting for the floodgates to open. You can see now that it looks like Umbar are going to be moving forward in full force. Dale are also there, and they'll start filtering in. Those Trolls of the White Hand went way into the backfield, as well as the Champions of the White Hand. They were getting targeted by the crossbows, I assume. Champions of the White Hand in particular are looking very, very haggard at this point. Bit of a lull in proceedings here. Erebor's going to start to move their way forwards, establishing the initial front line, waiting for, I suppose, Umbar to come forward so they can advance as one. Snaga just sort of waiting as well. Calm before the storm as the Snaga start to hide. Uruk-hai crossbows getting into position. Of course, our Blackguards and the Castamir's Rangers, again, more tools that will be very useful. Isengard do not have the skirmish impunity that they would need in order to try and make this work. Here comes the Uruk-hai crossbows. So again, one of the central pillars to the Isengard army, and definitely useful. What are they going to fire at though? Firing into the Umbar units. They might be out of ammunition. Well, the Castamir's Rangers aren't actually, but of course our Blackguards maybe, because they've got their two scimitars out. Here comes the Umbar infantry moving forwards. A large force indeed. Snaga skirmishers are also getting ready to fire. Here they go. Throwing their javelins into the Belagaya halberds. But the inaccuracy of them is not helping them here, the loose formation. Doing well for Umbar. Meanwhile, the Corsair Blackguards coming in. A very depleted unit able to disrupt the Uruk-hai crossbows. This may be the opportunity that the blue team were waiting for to come forward in force. Although they may also wait for Dale. Just overwhelming force. Isengard have got a few scary units, of course. The Nazkai, the Uruk-hai Berserkers are also lurking somewhere. There they are. But not enough, I don't feel like. Not enough. There is obviously the line of thought which maybe Isengard should have attacked into the dwarves, but I don't feel as though that would have netted them much either. The dwarves were waiting on the other side of the choke point, and it would have just been a role reversal. The dwarven catapult would have had a fairly easy time getting a fair amount of kills as well. And ultimately, it wouldn't have helped out much because the red team still would have lost elsewhere on the battlefield. A few more kills onto the Uruk-hai crossbows. Nothing too substantial so far though. I mean, the Snaga are basically right in front of these units. What are they actually going for? They're going for the crossbowmen? Maybe? I mean, they're getting kills. Here come the savages. Again, only a very depleted unit which Umbar are using to sort of disrupt the Isengard skirmish rhythm here. And that's what Isengard need. They need their skirmishers to be doing the business. The Corsair Blackguards obviously defeat seems certain. There's a couple of banner carriers and one of the actual javelin men left alive. The Seafarers of Nindamos, for Numenor, obviously use a very similar model to the Corsair Blackguards, upcoming Numenor faction. Do those crossbows still actually have ammo? Or is it only their Uruk-hai scimitars they have left? don't think the Ballista has ammunition left either, which, if Isengard is running out of ammo, that's not great for them. It does look as though the blue team is still more than happy to utilise Erebor's skirmish power to try and whittle Isengard down, soften them up for the kill. This Uruk-hai infantry unit over here in particular has been really cut down to size by some iron-foot crossbows. Now they're going after the pikemen, which probably wise. I mean, without the pikemen, Isengard have got really nothing that can hold their line in shape for any length of time. There's the Uruk-hai infantry as well. It's a lot of AP, but I mean, it's low quality AP for the most part. I mean, the Nazkai and the Uruk-hai Berserkers are higher quality, but I mean, you would still imagine that, you know, this is something which factions of the quality of Umbar, Erebor, and Dale are not going to have the most issues dealing with basic Axeman. And here we go. So this is going to be, I think, the final engagement. Umbar are going to be moving forward in force with their Halberdiers and their Castamir's Legion. The Uruk-hai crossbows are going to break up the charge, so they must be out of ammunition. The Uruk-hai Reavers are going to come in as well. The Reavers with their AP will not be useless, but not really the heroes that Isengard need. Here we go, the engagement is beginning. Another beefy line battle, which I feel as though ultimately the blue team are just going to be able to slowly but surely force the red team back. There's some 4th Legion Shield Guard on the way. Mithril Guard, so the walls of Khazad-dûm still very much thirsting for blood. Aru and Aru Sentinels also getting onto the front line, making sure that the phalanx advantage does not go to Isengard. What have we got here? The Nazkai is still sort of waiting back. The Uruk-hai Berserkers are now the target of arrow fire from, well, crossbow fire I should say. But this is the sign which the Uruk-hai Berserkers just need to be committed into the melee, because you may as well commit them forwards at this point. And also, you could try and break the back of this assault, this sort of first wave at the very least, and then see where it leads you, rather than trying to go for a sort of wave-based defence. Snaga skirmishers, they still have ammunition, but they're shaken. They're probably the target of a whole bunch of skirmish pressure from the blue team. The Bane Guard, meanwhile, have forced their way far too far into this area, going after the Nazkai with the artillery now. The time has come, I think, for Captain Gervais to just throw caution to the wind, commit everything, make the blue team work as hard as possible for it. But yeah, I think the Bane Guard were trying to push their way through to get to the crossbows, but that was always going to end in failure, I feel like. I mean, the AP will certainly help them. Ooh, bit of fronting fire there. Killing just as many friends as foes. There are the Snaga skirmishers. More Bane Guard from the backfield. The Berserkers, meanwhile, are just getting shot to pieces without any sort of reaction from Captain Gervais, which I think is sad. He's a better player than that. The Berserkers are absolute... They're not the sort of thing you want absorbing arrow fire. The last thing in your roster for Isengard that you want absorbing arrow fire is the Berserkers, other than arguably the Lurtz hunting pack, because they have like next to no armour. They're just getting cut down here. They're finally moving forward, but their hit points are probably long gone at this point. And the AP would have been exceedingly useful at dealing with some of the heavily armoured troops that are moving forward. Meanwhile, the Guards of Khazad-dûm and the Mithril Guard tag team. Here come the Nazkai. But yeah, I think it's probably a little bit too late. I mean, the Snaga getting in the way of Guards of Khazad-dûm, that is a... I don't think there is a more lopsided fight, really. Slowly but surely, this fight is reaching its inevitable conclusion. The Snaga are obviously doing their best.
They have lost half their men.
So that's half of the Isengard army gone. The Blacklock Engineers firing their bolts in, scything their way through this other unit of Snaga skirmishers, which are trying to do some damage, make something happen. Now you can see Dale's units are also in the back there. The Swordmasts of Kharnan, the Marksmen, Earls of Askaroth making their way to the front line, which obviously are no pushovers. Definitely on the upper end of line infantry units that you can field. That's a lot of crossbow bolts. I think there's a lot of axes being thrown as well. Yes, iron-foot axe throwers, crossbow corsairs firing into this section of the field where the Nazkai and the Uruk-hai Berserkers are. The strongest point of the Isengard army at this point is being focused down. The Dragon Slayers were also committed over here, so it's not like they were up against the soft target in melee either. Oof. Nice hit there from the Dwarven Catapult, going right through that unit of Snaga. As Umbar continue to just force their way through the flagging Isengard front line. those javelins, trying to get as many kills as they possibly can, but as we sort of reach the inevitable conclusion of this fight, it was a good fight actually. It may not have been the most even in terms of kills by the end, but I feel as though this really does represent teamwork in many ways. I feel as though the blue team had a much better idea of what they were doing as a team, whereas the red team felt very disparate. They did reinforce Gondor to their credit, but Imladris should have attacked sooner. Lothlorien should have committed their entire army to help Gondor, I think. And Isengard, you know, they really had no option in the late game other than to just try and wall up over here, try and use the choke point, try and use their ballista. But in the end, it wasn't going to work out for them. This sort of defense from Isengard would have worked if his team elsewhere had done a little bit better, I feel like. Imladris needed to attack sooner. Lothlorien needed to reinforce Gondor with their entire army immediately. You know, you can't afford to sort of go for the touchy-feely approach against Khazad-dûm, just commit a few units here and there, because it won't work. Especially not when they're receiving support from a huge Umbar army as well. More was needed. But again, you live and you learn. And it was a well-played match by the blue team. I would say that the blue team certainly won this more than the red team lost it. The red team were just unprepared for the way in which the blue team approached the fight. And obviously Khazad-dûm are very, very powerful in this match as well. That can't be denied.
Let the crows have his miserable bones, and let our swords have his men.
In the upcoming 0.97 patch, that fight between Khazad-dûm and Gondor would be much more even. As opposed to Khazad-dûm Wrecking Ball that they are in 0.96, they will be much more reasonable than 0.97. But even so, even with Khazad-dûm being... If Khazad-dûm were their 0.97 selves in this battle, I still feel as though the blue team would have won. The teamwork was much better. You can see now that Isengard are pretty much in full retreat. This is the end of the fight. Elves of Esgaroth are fighting here in the backfield against, I think, the one unit of Uruk-hai which is left. The Elves of Esgaroth are going to finish off Captain Gervais's army. Here come the Elves of Dale. They're going to break the Uruk-hai infantry, I would imagine. Wavering. If that was a lance unit, they definitely would have broken, and there they go. So that's pretty much that. I think that's just about all she wrote for Isengard's army. Celebrations en masse. There goes the champions of the White Hand, breaking off. And there we go. Victory for the blue team on the mountain pass. Teamwork was on point. Very well played to all involved. Let's see who got the most kills and where. So actually Erebor getting the least kills, but again that's not terribly surprising considering the fact that they only really committed their armies at the end, and Isengard I think did a pretty good job of dealing with the questionable wave-based tactics Erebor were using. Dale also getting below 1,000 kills, but they were primarily a support army. Most of their army was sort of left in reserve to deal with the Imladris advance, which it did. Key part there, but obviously the main reason why the attackers, the blue team, won. Khazad-dûm and Umbar getting over 2,000 kills each. Very well done. Obviously brute force right there in the middle, breaking the spirit of the red team. Imladris getting a lot of kills, and again they could have got even more, I feel like, if they committed their infantry to fighting Dale earlier. But you know, you live and you learn. Lothlorien did okay as well, and you know, despite being on the receiving end of a Khazad-dûm advance, Gondor got over 1,000 kills to their credit, which obviously the Trebuchet, Wardens of Minas Ithil, Gondor's infantry in general is pretty sturdy. If this had been sort of a faction with lesser infantry, they wouldn't have done so well. Isengard obviously doing well at the end because of their sort of positional advantage with their crossbows and their ballista, but that wasn't enough to sort of pull the fight back from the place where it was at the time. So let's see what did the damage. Herald of the Light in the Dark getting the most kills, so we'll see. Obviously the Mithril Guard doing a fantastic job. That AP, exactly what the Doctor ordered against Gondor in particular. The Guards of Khazad-dûm also getting over 300 kills, so definitely the terrible twosome there, which did the most damage for Khazad-dûm, but obviously a lot of other units getting over 100 kills, pikes, sentries, all kinds of Khazad-dûm. Khazad-dûm Reclaimers doing quite well for themselves, over 200 kills on the unit of Axguard, 2nd Legion Axguard in general doing very well, but again, the armour piercing very useful against Gondor. 4th Legion in this case, just getting below 100 kills each, but again, Gondor's infantry is strong enough that the 4th Legion won't offer you a significant advantage in melee. Dwarven Miners doing okay, Sons to Fallen doing okay, so yeah. Good spread of kills there across the entirety of the Khazad-dûm army. And yeah, I think this is a good poster for teamwork, working out well. The dwarves managing to overcome the elves in this case, and obviously their allies. So yeah, well played to all involved. Big thank you to Herald of the Light in the Dark for sending this battle to me. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next, which I hope will be the RP battle which Lango sent me. But again, I will need the map sent to me in order for me to do that, because it was an edited version of an existing map, I feel like, is what they use for that. And also something else which is worth clearing up in this case, the Minas Tirith battle, which I did last. There were a few complaints that it was only available in 360p. That is not something which is on my end, and it's not something that I can fix, unfortunately. Obviously, I wouldn't render a video in only 360p. That's ridiculous. You know, you'd have to go out of your way, I think, to actually do that these days with the editing software that's available. So it would be mad for me to have done that. So unfortunately, it is on YouTube's end, and I feel as though that is a result mainly of the battle being very long. I mean, it was nearly 2 hours long, so YouTube tends to... There's a sweet spot for YouTube sort of length which they like, which is between 10 and 20 minutes, which I usually go over, but it's usually not to the extent of 2 hours. And obviously it didn't really like that. Total War is a lot of things are happening on the screen which is fairly dynamic, so obviously YouTube probably not liking that. And also I am a relatively small channel, so the priority that they're going to be giving someone like me is I'm going to be fairly low on the packing order. So that's the reason why it didn't happen to everyone, which I'm glad of. You know, obviously 1080p is available, I think, for the majority of people. But it also shouldn't be an issue which should happen in the future too much either, because it's very few and far between when I'm going to be releasing battles that are 2 hours long. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, I hope you enjoyed that as well, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.